How's it going? Welcome to the breakdown of the second version of our MMA strength conditioning program. Um, this is a brief overview of the program, and then in the next few videos, we'll go through the exact exercises that we have programmed in there for you. So there are a few different slides that are coming up here pretty quick. So I'll share a little bit about my background if you don't know me, and then we'll talk through the importance of strength conditioning, especially for combat sport athletes, the big picture, what we're trying to accomplish, and how strength and conditioning can be beneficial to you, phases of development and training, breaking down the program, and then we'll talk about the complete athlete, something new for you. So my background, right now, I'm currently a professor at the University of Kansas and also assistant director of the Jayhawk Athletic Performance Laboratory, one of the top sports science labs, definitely in the U.S., if not the entire world. We focus on sport science research for elite athletic populations all the way down to the youth. So what does that mean? Well, we just examine all of the contributors to athletic performance, whether it's physical, whether it's physiological, whether it's psychological, and how those all play together to make good athletes great, great athletes elite. I did my training at Oklahoma State University, where I received my PhD, as you see on the screen, and my master's. Um, Over the last few years, I've racked up a few certifications. So, certified strength and conditioning specialist with distinction, certified personal trainer with distinction. What does that mean? Um, Beyond passing the test, they get you that certificate. You've put in a certain amount of work in the field, whether that be research, where you are researching on topics and you're presenting those topics, or you're publishing on topics, and you're sharing what you're finding um, from a research standpoint with the field. So, um, it is a great honor, and I'm glad to have it. And then I'm also certified in USA weightlifting, so Olympic weightlifting, like you'll see in the programs, cleans. Um, we don't do a ton of jerks, but you might see those come up. Snatch, we don't do a ton of that, but you might see it come up. Functional movement screen, movement is the basis of function, of strength, of power, of speed. One of my first certifications was in the functional movement screen. And then I have international sport performance analysis certifications as well. So a lot of certs, a lot of experiences, and not to show off, but just to show you that I do have expertise. These programs are sound whenever they're written. They're written with the athlete in mind, and of course, my educational roots go to Nebraska. So that's Midland University is where I graduated from. Over the last decade, I've been involved primarily as a strength and conditioning professional and have recently developed as a researcher. These experiences have spanned across many different professional sporting organizations, many different levels, and of course, most recently, I've become interested, had some great opportunities in combat sports. Thank you, Carney Combat Sports. Thanks, Coach Richard, for the opportunities to contribute to your group. And then I've also become interested in long-term athlete development. So one of the big differences you'll see in the version 2 of our program versus version 1, now you'll see 4 different stages of development. We'll talk about those, why they're important, what it means. But if we can measure out the development over time, put it into phases, then from my perspective as a strength coach, I don't have to overwhelm you. We don't have to do a ton of lifting all at once to help get you stronger. We don't have to do a ton of conditioning all at once to get you in shape. So, so yeah, my background, in addition to obviously what I just mentioned, I began as an athlete. I began lifting weights at the age of 12 to help out with football sport performance. I grew up in the South or in the Southern Midwest, whatever you want to call it. So football is culture, right? You get to a certain age. If you're not in the weight room, then you just don't make that next step towards varsity football. And those are just the facts. So um, once I began weight training, I immediately noticed a difference, and it hasn't left my mind since. It contributed to many of my successes, a collegiate playing career, now coaching career. I've been involved with some really great organizations, some really great athletes, strong performance. We had an awesome year back in 2022, six drafted in the first round, four in the top 10. Some of my work with football athletes has spanned, of course, with Spelman, but also at the collegiate levels, Washington State University, University of Nebraska Kearney, even to golf, believe it or not. So, um, my background has taken me from understanding movement and then designing training programs to help improve athletic performance. What you see in the bottom left corner that you saw pop up there is more to the long term athlete development piece, right? So it really began with local performance at Nebraska Kearney and has since progressed to some of our programs here. And just this spring, our youth baseball team that came and trained with us in the off season, they've had an awesome spring. I know it's youth sports, but they've won all their tournaments they've been in. They're hitting harder, they're hitting farther, and they train on the 10-5-3 system, which I'll tell you more about, but it's at the core of our training philosophy. It's at the core of our training programs. Next to that box, you'll see power lifters. If you're familiar with powerlifting, then you know squat, bench, deadlift. Um, those are the name of the game. If you're not familiar with powerlifting, it's essentially a sport where you have three lifts: squat, you have a bench press, and you have a deadlift. You get 3 attempts at each to lift the heaviest that you can. You're put into weight classes, and the person that lifts the highest amount wins. Pretty straightforward. And as you could guess, um, a key contributor to success is muscular strength and force development. So, using the 10-5-3, have had a chance to contribute to two younger powerlifters' career, but my base of training, my background is from a powerlifting perspective. What you'll see more recently is Midland University, which I helped found. What it was at the time was a powerlifting club, and it's progressed to the powerlifting team. And then, last but not least, is a shout out to Kearney Combat Sports. They're athletes and our group of champions and our group of athletes here in this picture, which has really influenced my training philosophy for the 10-5-3. So, why is strength conditioning important for combat sport athletes? For combat sport athletes, you have to be familiar with the UFC, but you may not be familiar with the UFCPI. The UFC Performance Institute has a host of professionals there to support the top combat sports athletes in the world, right? So not only do they have strength and conditioning coaches, they have nutritionists, they have dietitians, they have physical therapists, they have sports psychologists, and they even have lab-based exercise physiologists and PhDs there to help with some of the research on elite athletes and publishing their findings. Several years ago, they published this cross-sectional performance analysis and projection of the UFC athlete, and it has a ton of information in there. It is free to access. You just Google the title and you'll download it. Um, a few hundred pages of different information about combat sports athletes, primarily MMA, male and female, every weight class, and they have everything from what you see here, which highlights the importance of strength conditioning for combat sport athletes. Here shows win methods by weight class, and you can see there are three separate categories for win methods. The first is by decision, the second is KO slash TKO, and then the last is submission. Regardless of individual, male, female, regardless of weight class, what do you notice? Most fights are won by decision. What does that mean? For the combat sport athlete, you should be prepared to go the full duration of a fight, right? So with that, strength conditioning can help you there. If you're technical and if you understand the tactics going into the fight, that gives you a competitive edge. But if your body is strong and prepared to handle the demands of the competition, that only benefits you even more. Um, Table below the chart above pretty much is a testament. I don't know if you all will be able to see this in the video, but the testament to strength conditioning. Several of the components that athletes are really interested in can be found in a sound strength conditioning program. Um, some athletes are interested in more pop on their punches, more pop on their kicks, being explosive. Well, in strength conditioning terms, the basis is developing force, developing your relative strength capacities. So, how much weight can you lift relative to your body mass? It translates over to whenever you're sparring or whenever you're competing. Then that we can translate into power production, like plyometrics is a common term, right? The ability of the stretch shortening cycle. So, how high can you jump, or how much force can you produce at a given velocity, or in the least amount of time? Some people call it twitchiness, right? So, all of these go hand in hand. There's a great benefit to strength conditioning. Okay, so what is the big picture within my field? Um, this pyramid is common. It's something that you probably learn in one of the first courses if you're taking a course, or that you probably see in the majority of textbooks. What it is more so a hierarchy, right? At its foundation, our goal is the physical development. Oh, sorry, my phone is ringing. Um, at its foundation is Okay, sorry about that. At its foundation is physical development. What is physical development? Physical development is typically related to quality movement patterns, muscular strength, muscular power, sprinting speed. Those are at its base primary physical contributors to athletic performance. And that is where I come in. That is my expertise. And then the next step up, if you have developed a functional base at the physical level, then um, your coach or your coaches are responsible for the technical and tactical development. Technical development, what is that? Um, those are just the fundamentals, right? Whether it be striking, whether it be grappling, whatever your art is, your primary discipline or your secondary discipline. What are the techniques that will contribute to hopefully a successful outcome? Tactics are more so about your game plan, what you hope to do once you're inside that octagon, right? So just based off of your strengths, based off of your opponent's strengths, based off of your weaknesses, based off of your opponent's weaknesses, what tactics might you use to get an advantage, a competitive advantage using the technical capacities that you have, right? So as we work through this hierarchy, right, physical is low hanging fruit. Most people do not invest in their physical development, right? And then technical, once you have developed physically, then technique. It's usually the fundamentals that separate still the good from the great. And then the tactics. Once you've developed a technical basis, you need to develop your tactics. You need to understand the game. You need to have game IQ, right? And then on the high end of this, for our field, the way we look at it is the psychological factors, the mental skills, which play a huge role. So, do you have a framework in your mind that helps you get through adversity? Are you confident in your preparation? Are you confident in your performance? Do you practice visualization? Do you visualize yourself being successful? Do you visualize how you want the fight to go? And even beyond the fight, are you visualizing training? Can you see it in your mind, the positions that you need to be in or the positions that you don't need to be in? And can you see it frame by frame by frame? The psychological aspect plays a huge role in athletic performance, especially at the elite level. There was a study done years ago looking at Olympic gold medalists across sport, across discipline. So you have figure skaters, and you also have Olympic weightlifters. You have wrestlers, and you also have track and field athletes. Something similar between Olympic gold medalists were their mindset, right? They're able to focus, they're able to handle adversity, they're confident, they can perform under pressure, they can also visualize and they can focus. So, the psychological aspect is very important. And that's a 30,000 foot view of our big picture, but other things that contribute to your improvements from this program are setting realistic goals. I think it's realistic for everybody to number one, meet some of the criteria that's listed in the Excel sheet. So your ability to just perform body weight exercises, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and then some of those core exercises like squat, bench press, deadlift relative to your body mass. Another goal of training should always be to come out of it 100% healthy, right? So if you want to be a pro, we're not training to beat you up. We're not training to failure. We might push you pretty close, but our big priority is first health and then high performance. So those are some goals that this program will help you achieve. Um, as you progress through a career, and especially in a sport as demanding as MMA, combat sports, you have to invest in your physical development, and you also have to invest in your recovery, right? So there's no better way than a sound strength conditioning program. Then the last piece is transfer of training, which I talked about briefly. Some of the athletes that are interested in developing more of that pop, more of that twitch, well, strength conditioning can help you do that. We can program in different types of plyometrics, which are things like hops, skips, bounds, throws, right, to help with your force generating capabilities transfer over to a strike or a kick, a punch or a kick. So that's the big picture of strength and conditioning. So, what are our phases of development? In the Excel sheet, you'll see several tabs. Um, these are in order of your training stage or trainability. So you'll see a prepare tab, you'll see a develop tab, you'll see a perform tab, you'll see a peak tab. This is more so long-term development. You have to think about your career in phases, right? So if you've never been in a organized fight, right, in the octagon. It doesn't matter how old you are, and if you haven't lifted a weight, you're going to fall into the prepare category. Remember, we cannot get to peak without adequately preparing you and developing you and for you to actually perform. So, this is a way to keep you safe, but also to ensure that you're developing appropriately within the programming system. Okay. So, the focus of the prepare phase exercise technique, and you see that's across the board. We're trying to develop a base level of strength and fitness, right? So, what does that look like? We are starting to teach you how to train, right? How to lift weights, and as you do that, and how to condition your body. As you do that, you'll get stronger, more fit. There are specific conditioning interval times or specific rest times which match up with the sport. We're focusing on the fundamentals, and this is for beginners. So if you have not trained consistently within this program for the last 6 months, then you would fall into the prepare phase. There are some opportunities to test out of the prepare phase, but the exercises you do here will be progressed in the later stages. After at least 6 months and after at least hitting the criteria for body weight exercises, relative strength exercises, then and only then can you progress to the develop phase. It doesn't really matter how old you are. Again, it doesn't really matter your level of competition. We are thinking long term here. So by progressing through phase by phase, once you get to peak, there is limited you'll be limited there'll be limited fatigue, right, limited soreness because you have trained your body in the system and you're prepared to handle the workload, which is very high at certain points, and it's very intense at certain points, but that's what it should be. You're at your peak. Okay, so back to the second phase of development, which is the develop phase. This is for early intermediates, so somewhere between 6 months to 12 months um, training within our system, of course, focusing on exercise technique, but now we begin to get a little bit more specific with the conditioning periods and durations, and then specific with developing strength. So from bilateral exercises, you'll start to see unilateral exercises or a different range of motion. And here's where we'll start to develop power. Strength is the basis for power, which is why we don't focus on it early on in that first phase, which is prepare, right? You need to develop you need to be strong enough to be powerful. It's basically how it goes. Unless you're genetically gifted, naturally powerful, you need to be strong enough to improve power. There's a direct relationship there. And of course, we're focusing on the fundamentals in the second phase. Third phase is there's kind of a split down the middle, right? And this goes based off of how your career progresses, but also how you adapt physically. Um, if you are the type of athlete that is naturally gifted, can naturally scrap, right? Then you might just need that develop phase to stay in condition, right? You're developing specific strength, you're developing power, you can scrap, you know how to translate it, and you have a really good coach to teach you techniques and tactics. Um, but on the other side of this split are for athletes that have a combination, one or the other, right? They're really gifted and they're really interested in training, continuing to train in the weight room. So they're ready for more specific strength and power exercises, more specific conditioning. Um, or it's just an athlete that really just needs this to help them get to their next stage in their career. So that is the perform phase, the third phase. This is for late intermediates. Regardless of where your career is, you need at least a year, if not a year and a half of training within our system um, to be able to participate in the perform exercises. So there are more exercises included in here. And as you go stronger throughout phases 1 and 2, you're able to handle those exercises and those volumes and those intensities. Then last but not least, you have your peak phase. This is for essentially, if you think about it, for athletes that they transitioned over from amateur, like experienced amateur, to professional, or they're now an experienced pro. Our goal here, right, is if you're not already in the UFC, if you're not already LFA, then we want to get you to those places. Um, how is that going to happen? Well, if we have specific strength conditioning approaches, it might be exactly what you need to develop physical capacity or to push your physical capacity. So you have more tools in your tool belt whenever you get into the octagon. But if nothing else, we are, as you see here, maintaining exercise technique, fitness, strength, and power. We're focusing on technique, tactics, and lifestyle. Lifestyle is huge, and you'll even see that in the perform phase. So, um, how many hours of sleep are you getting? How hydrated are you? Are there other habits outside of the ring that may limit your recoverability and your trainability? Tobacco, alcohol, um, fast food diet, things like that. So these are the phases of development. Hopefully, I didn't like overstate the phases. I gave you enough information, but prepare and develop, most people can do, and that's between 0 months of training up to about a year of training within our system, right? It's great if you go to the gym, you do bodybuilder workouts, but this is a different type of training. Okay. So you fit in to 1 and 2 if you are between 0 to 12 months trained, and then 3 and 4 if you are above a year training within our system. Another reason why is that if we develop you too fast, then it leaves little room for further adaptation and training, right? Then we have to come up with brand new workouts and training regimens just to push you a little bit further. So we're really trying to take our time again and develop. Okay, let's talk about phases of training. So once you select the right tab, which is sometimes the toughest thing to do, now we need to identify the correct phase of training. In a perfect world, right, you have at least 4 weeks dedicated to each block of training. The way that we organize training and strength conditioning is we start from the competition date and we work our way back as far as we can, ideally. Maybe in another video, I can break down annual training plans, but essentially, an annual training plan is a full calendar year, ideally. For Olympic level athletes, you have what's called a quadrennial. That's their annual training plan. So that is 4 years worth of competitions and training and finding phases to train and adapt, right? So that way we can get those athletes to a peak. But for most, what you'll see is just a 1 year annual training plan. Um, your macro cycle is typically comprised of months that are similar to one another. So if you want to develop endurance, strength, power, then you would have a sequence of months that are similar in your macro cycle. Mesocycle are typically weeks to months, with most of them being between 4 to 6 weeks, right? So that's an intermediate period where you can develop again those qualities. Then microcycles are days to weeks where you're focusing on those qualities. Um, Beyond that, what you see here are phases which fit in within those cycles. So your first phase that you see here is off camp. Think of this as off season if you've played another sport before. So for football, your off season typically is winter conditioning, right? Whereas your preseason is typically in the summer, right? And then you go into your competitive season, and then you have your postseason where the emphasis really isn't on physical development, but really on recovery regeneration. For fighting, we have an off camp, right? So this would take place If we think about these phases in at least 4 week blocks, then this would take place around 12 weeks before your fight. Okay, this is just general training. All right, very, very general, but it's a specific period of focused training where you're not actively preparing for a fight, but you're preparing your body. So I know I said 12 weeks back, but this is where most athletes will spend the majority of their time until they have a fight on the books. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready, essentially. And then from there, we can transition you into a pre-fight camp period. So you have committed to terms for a fight, but you're not actively preparing for a fight or in a fight camp. That's what that means. Okay. So this is about 8 weeks out. Your exercises become more specific. Your conditioning becomes more specific as we prepare you for fight camp. In fight camp, right? This is the most specific as it will get. Strength and conditioning should complement your fight camp, so our volumes will be low. What does that mean? We're not doing a ton of reps in the weight room, but we do want high intent. These workouts will be shorter in duration, higher in intent, so that way you can go recover and prepare for your fight. And then post fight camp will depend, but typically it is around 4 weeks, depending on how the fight goes, depending on injuries, depending on how the weight cut went. And this is really just to recover and to restore your body and to restore your ranges of motion, so on and so forth, and plan for the next fight. Okay, so the breakdown of the program, I try to keep it as simple as I can. There are three components to the program that you will see, right? Once you identify your phase, and then of your development, and then you identify the phase of training, then you can get into the program. You'll see a warm up, which includes myofascial release, corrective exercises, and a dynamic warm up. That is all to prepare your body. Kind of have a stoplight system here: yellow, green, red. Um, the myofascial release is just basic foam rolling, right? And I'll have some videos up soon on that. Um, and that's really just to free up some of your muscle and to enhance the range of motion that you're able to achieve through dynamic exercise. Corrective exercises, these are generally for fighters going to target, and for most athletes, the ankles, knees, hips, shoulders, and your neck, C spot. For most athletes, those are the major joints of movement, and those are the ones that cause either some type of restriction or potentially impingement or pain. So once you progress through those exercises, you'll see a dynamic warm up. In that dynamic warm up, we have some basic things like toe walks, hill walks, zombie walks, some basic things all the way to skips, to hops, and some sprints. There's even some speed ladder work in some of those workouts. The dynamic warm up, a warm up is exactly what it sounds like, to warm your body up. So if you have some specific things you like to do, um, that you feel like add to your routine or better prepare your body, feel free to add those in. In the main session, you'll see exercise groups by A exercises, B exercises, C exercises. These fit into the training methodology known as 10-5-3. Like I mentioned a few slides ago, 10-5-3 was first developed because I was working with youth athletes and we had multiple programs going at once, but I was also training higher level athletes that needed more general exercises. Others need more specific, so 10-5-3 is a great way to address that. Your A exercise group corresponds typically to tens. These are exercises for function. So these are fundamental sound exercises. Some of these are regressions to our core exercises. So you'll see things like incline push-ups. You'll see things like goblet squats. You'll see things sometimes like step-ups or sit-ups, basic exercises to prep your body for force output, for power output. For fives are for strength. So these are your core exercises. If you're in the prepare phase, you'll just have one of these exercises throughout your training. As you progress through to your perform peak phases, you'll have multiple exercises to build strength in one program or in one day. And then your threes are for power. So function, strength, power is how it flows. The main session, it's meant to be dense. It's meant to push you. It's meant for you to push yourself, right? With safe form and technique. So there are minimal breaks in between exercises. If you see a list of 3 exercises, it's meant to be done in a circuit. So you'll go from a squat to a push up to inverted row, and around and around and around. Okay. Um, that's the main session. Basics done well. Conditioning, another important aspect of strength conditioning for combat sport athletes is the conditioning component. MMA in and of itself has a negative work to rest ratio. What does that mean? Is that you're working longer than you rest. In general fights, you're working 3 times as much as you rest, 3 minutes on, 1 minute break. And championship fights and professional level fights, you're working 5 times as much as you rest. So you can't just roll into the octagon after, even if you're training hard, you can't just roll in and expect to really hit your peak if you're not focusing on conditioning. So your conditioning, you'll see, is broke up into energy systems. Within humans, based on physiology, there are typically 3 energy systems. You have what's called the ATP PCR energy system. So up to around 6 seconds, maybe 10 seconds or so. That's that quick burst of energy. The pros, cons. Pros is it's a quick burst of energy. The downside is that you can't sustain that high of an output very long. But we focus on that early in the week at specific time intervals with specific rests that will translate to um, your training capabilities and to hopefully your capability in octagon. You have an intermediate energy system called the glycolytic energy system. And so this is what it sounds like, intermediate. So anywhere from 10 to 15 seconds up to sometimes around 2 minutes. Definitely 1 minute though for most individuals, most athletes. So we target this by um, doing longer intervals at higher sustained efforts with longer recovery in between. Your glycolytic system is fueled by glycogen, which, if you have a fair amount of carbs in your diet, so carbs are important, you can replenish this energy system and or you can better prepare for training and competition. And then on the other end of the scale, is your oxidative energy system. So this is very low intensity but long duration, right? So what you'll see towards the end of your weeks are just lower intensity, longer duration rides, typically on the bike or maybe a jog. So that's just for general conditioning, but conditioning plays a huge role. So that concludes the breakdown of the program. If you have questions, I'll drop in my email for most using this program right now. Um, you're at Carney Combat Sport, so Coach Richard can get in touch with me, and I'm happy to help you all out. We have a big announcement coming, so new programming coming this summer, mainly based on the needs of the athlete. So dropping in July, we have a complete athlete. So it's essentially designed to elevate athletes, teams, coaches, communities. Um, what we've done so far is we've nailed down the physical component, right? So I know how to develop athletes physically, but I know that it takes more than physical fitness. So the complete athlete also includes resources for nutrition, recovery, mental skills, and there will also be some mentorship resources available. So you can find this on my website, quincyjohnsonfitness.com, or you can talk with your coach if you have a coach, or teammates if you're a part of a team, to discuss and see if you like to just join as a team. That again, that's the complete athlete. So yeah, feel free, join us. Otherwise, that's all I have. Thanks for your time. This turned into, 30-minute lecture, a breakdown of the program. There's my email contact information if you're looking for something more specific, or if you just have questions about the program, feel free, reach out. Peace.